All right, great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Kate, for that really interesting gameful presentation. I love the idea of gameful pedagogy. It's that really idea that, I love the self-determination theory link there as well. I think it's something that we really work on. My name's Danny. I'm presenting here on behalf of a team from the University of Sydney, Natasha, Nabil, Chris, and Judy. My particular role at Sydney is a faculty developer, and so I have a strange role in learning analytics in that I generally just try to help instructors teach better, and some of that is through data. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is, I guess, a practitioner perspective of how to actually get faculty and academics and staff on board with learning analytics through something that we've tried at Sydney University. So I wanted to start with this quote from a paper from a few years back, and I won't read it out, but essentially it's saying that, from a university point of view, learning analytics is exciting. It intertwines various educational, admin, and technology issues, and there are particular drivers which kind of encourage universities and their faculty to essentially pick up learning analytics. For example, increase efficiency, enrich student learning, and these kinds of things. Now, there's a paragraph, a sentence which I've hidden at the beginning, and this is the sentence. Universities have been quick to adopt LA despite the cost, complexity, and risks. Now, at this point, we should be thinking, that's a bit strange. Have they really? But it turns out actually I've modified this quote because actually it's talking about LMSs and not learning analytics. And this paper actually comes from 2005, which is quite a nice read. And it talks about how universities have been quick to pick up LMSs as opposed to LA. And so I guess the question for us as LA practitioners and researchers is, why can't we put in place learning analytics there instead of LMSs? What's going on there in terms of the last 10 years of LA that is causing a little bit of a hiccup in terms of buy-in from universities? And so I wanted to kind of concentrate on our particular focus for our instructors at Sydney University. And for us at Sydney University, when we started on the learning analytics journey many years ago, we had some issues. We had instructors who were working with data, but this data was on scraps of paper or folders of Excel files. They wanted to reach out to students, but they couldn't, and so they felt really disconnected from their students, and their students were disconnected from them. They had workload issues as well that they wanted to do, and so anything that we wanted to try and help them with learning analytics had to actually help the workload issue. And also help construct this connection between them and their students. And also, we were obsessed with student evaluation scores, especially the scores around feedback. And so we had to find some way to actually drive this forward. We also had to work with existing values and belief systems that the instructors had. That being, they do intrinsically value meaningful feedback to students, even though it's really hard to give it, especially at scale. And also this really key one about promoting connection and promoting well-being and promoting support. And so in the specific context of Sydney University, being a fairly large research-centric institution, this is the context that we were working in as we were trying to introduce LA to our instructors. Now, I want to start building this map, which also appears in the practitioner reports, of what it looks like, I guess, to funnel faculty through the adoption of learning analytics. And so this map will grow as we go through the presentation, but I wanted to kind of start with, give an LA platform somewhere, and there's prior conditions which the instructors bring with them, which we've discussed already. So our particular approach at the University of Sydney, starting from 2012, was to develop this strange thing called the SRES, which I'll actually ask you to experience soon. And over the years, what you see from this particular graph, not very scientific, is that the uptake has been fairly significant over the years. It's the blue line, the number of students reached by this particular system is peaking at 70,000 because that's the number of students enrolled at the university, so we can't get higher than that. But the number of instructors, the number of essentially courses or subjects involved is increasing. And over these years, what we've done is, and that's went too quickly, but what we've done is we've kind of worked with our instructors, and we'll see this through the presentation today as well, to build things in that they need around data. And in the process of doing so, the feeling, I'll show you a few results soon, is that this kind of helps them to own the system more and actually adopt and implement it better as well. So I'll present a few results today, and the results today are mainly from an interview study we've done from 2017 onwards, and it'll be interesting to see the positives, but focusing on the negatives today about this adoption process. So the SRES at Sydney University is a bit strange in that it's quite different from any LA that you may have seen before. It focuses not on the big data visualizations and those kind of things, but it focuses on what we call small data. It's data which an individual instructor, individual student, individual course might find useful. And so what I wanted to see if we could do or try is if we could pop in as students. So I'm just going to pop in a link into the Hoover chat and see if it works. But before I do that, I'd like to ask you to pick a random number between 0, 1 and 50. And then that'll be your number in your head. Just don't pick those ones on the screen, or I guess you could. And then we'll get a piece of paper and write down a username and password for yourself. And so it could be something like lac001 with the password plac001w. So any kind of 2-digit combination between 0, 1 and 50 will work there. So while I get the link ready for you, if you could do that on a piece of paper on your desk, that would be really helpful. Okay. All right, so hopefully people have had a chance to write down a username and password for themselves, and there will be some overlap just because there's 72 people in here and I've only created 50 accounts for you, and so you may be logging in on the same account as someone from across the world, but that's okay. So with that in mind, so username lac0 and then the 2 numbers, and then plac0 2 numbers w for your password. I'd like to transport you into the mind of a student who is perhaps in the 0th week, so before they start the first week of university studies, and you receive this email or this announcement from your instructor, from your course coordinator. We're looking forward to working with you. Please help us to learn a bit more about you here. So I'm going to pop this particular link into the Hoover chat, so it's easier to click on. So if you wouldn't mind popping into Hoover chat and clicking on that link. If you're only in Zoom, I'll also pop that link into Zoom. And if you could log in with that username and password that you created for yourself, and just pretend that you're in the shoes of a student in week 0 and log into that thing and post a few things about yourself. It's all anonymous because I've just given you generic usernames. Okay, just having a look at the data coming in. Excellent. There's some information coming in already. If you'd like to take a photo of yourself or your keyboard or your cat, that's great too, using the thing that you see on the screen. So for those who aren't able to get to a separate tab or a separate device, what you would be seeing on the screen is something like what you see on my screen now. So you see something like, hi, Danny, or whatever your name is in the system, help your tutor Sam and coordinator get to know you, upload a photo of yourself, how do you pronounce your name, what's one goal you have, and also how you're feeling about this semester. So there's essentially a form that your students can use to give you some data or information about themselves, which you as an instructor might find useful. Okay, I'm just having a look at the data coming through. Excellent. Good. Okay, so there's a bit of data coming through, so that's good. Now, I wanted to, if you're still on that, then please do continue doing that. But I wanted to kind of move us from thinking from a student perspective in week 0 now over to a different perspective of an instructor now, starting to think about how do we actually use this small data which students have offered up, the small data which instructors may find useful. And so imagine you're a tutor now in week 1 and you're meeting your student group for the first time. What our instructors told us is that they wanted a way to get at relevant information about their students quickly. And so what I'm showing on the screen now is a view that our instructors quite enjoy. And so if I just pretend that I'm the instructor Sam, for example, I can show Sam's list of students, and for example, I can see myself up there and any other students here. Nope. All right, let's go to a different instructor. Okay, so some people have put in, so for example, LAC user 42 has put in this, LAC user 12 has put in this, but let's go back to Sam because there's actually some actual information there. And so, for example, here, the instructors at this stage in week 1, before they even step into the classroom, they can kind of see and hear their students. They can press this little play button and get a pronunciation of a student's name. They can see how their students are feeling. And once they step foot into their class, they can say, okay, well, Danny's participation was okay and he was a bit disruptive maybe, and then save that data to the system. And so our instructors quite like this because there was the idea that they were able to take these really high workload data things like, you know, I want to collate photos of students and I want to put together some participation information from classes into one place. And so after this, I wanted us to kind of imagine now that we're the course or the subject coordinator at the end of week 1. How about we try reaching out to our students now who may be, who may be experiencing some issues. And so what you've got on the screen here is what this system calls a filter. It's called a filter because my colleague and I who made this in 2012, we're biologists and chemists, and so filtration made sense to us. And so if you have 1,000 students, you want to filter that to 200 students to send a particular message to. And so here, for example, you can see that we're picking up people with a week 1 participation equals to 1, and then we can essentially send them an email or Gmail. It's fairly standard. It's similar to On Task, which you may have seen in an earlier session. And you can say, thanks for coming, and these kind of things. And we can also say, okay, well, maybe let's pick up the people who are being disruptive. Maybe next time let others speak. Or, and then for this one, maybe we want the week 1 participation comments. If it contains disruptive, then we want to show students that thing. And so what we can do with this is essentially very quickly pick up. Let me just do a few more actually. So I'm going to mark this one to okay and great. Okay. And then what the instructor or the course coordinator can do at this point is that they can send this personalized message out to all their students based on data, small data again, which the system knows about their students. And our instructors have told us that it's quite handy because it's data that they want to get. Okay, and then let's skip forward a few weeks and imagine that we're a subject coordinator now in week 4. Maybe assignment 1 has been submitted and has been graded, and so we want to send students some personalized support. So at this point, maybe we want to create a similar message template, for example. So here it's saying send it where the assignment has been graded, and then we can send something a bit like this. So customize a subject, customize for who the person is, the name of the person is receiving the email, and also customize the actual comments that are going in towards the students. And now we can also say, okay, well, maybe we want to pick out the people who had some particular issues with their assignment or some particular issues with the grade. And then based on this, we can send an email out again to the students. Now, this is all well and good, but our instructors told us, we want a way to actually get some feedback from students around this. And so what they told us they wanted is they wanted a two-way conversation with students. And so what we built into the system for this is that we built in a way where instructors could go in and actually make essentially a web page. And let me just delete a few of these not useful ones. And then this web page essentially allows the instructors to not only give feedback to students, but also receive feedback from students. And so what we could do here, I'm just doing quickly because I'm running out of time, is we could say, okay, we want to find out about students, about their reflections, and change this to allow students to feed information back in. And I'm going to post another link into Hoover Chat. And if you're still on the system, if you could click onto that So if you've already logged in and you've processed some data, hop back onto Hoover Chat and click onto that link. And what you should see is something that looks like what I have on the screen here, which is around, you've got a place where you can see your tutor's feedback, you can see your mark, you can see some encouragement and some personalized messages, but you can also see a way that you can actually feed back to your instructor and give them some information about how you're thinking about this. And so this is essentially for our instructors, it's helping them to close that feedback loop and build a bit of feedback literacy, which is really important. It's something which the on-task presentation before said a lot about. And so essentially what we're doing here through the system is that what instructors have been telling us through our interviews is that it's giving them this advantage over the way that they've been doing things. So they say a lot of these things around, we've moved from an existing practice, which may be manual or slow, to a very prompt a process now, because the ability for them to capture data in one place fairly easily is quite strong. And also is compatible with how they do it. So for example, that role that we saw before where they tick yes and no and great and okay and put in comments, that's how they used to do it on paper. But now that we can capture that data in one place, again, it's small data, but it's relevant data to instructors. Something else is that we can also, because we use Canvas at University of Sydney, SRS has a fairly good connection with Canvas. What we could do is right within the Canvas frame, you can LTI the SRES in there, and instructors have been starting to like this a lot because everything here is essentially coming from SRES, and right within that, right within Canvas, you can essentially give students that really customized, personalized feedback, but again, also receive that input from students again. And so it's really saving them a lot of time. But then I guess if we think about these things and think about analytics in terms of these characteristics, we've got the positives like the advantages it gives to people and compatibility with how they do things. But there's also these ideas of complexity and whether or not they can actually observe some benefit. And here's where some difficulty starts to arise when we start to kind of move on from persuading people, giving them a trial of things, to helping them to decide and implement something. And so there's a few challenges that we saw, especially through our interview studies. And so when we started this interview studies about 4 years ago, we found three main challenges coming through the data. One was about integration or lack thereof. One was, and what we solved through this is when we moved to Canvas in 2017, actually, Canvas is a very open nature AI, which allowed us to actually suck in a lot of data from it, and that largely solved the data integration issue. We also had speed issues with the system. It was originally written in Cold Fusion, to my embarrassment, but now it's written in Python, and that's kind of solved a lot of the speed issues. And also we had a lot of issues around usability, and these persist to today. And some of these usability issues, I'll show you some interesting quotes around it, speak at various points of this kind of adoption pipeline. We had some people who just said, other colleagues are telling me it just looks too hard. You're techie, but I can't do it because I'm not techie enough. And so people have this perception that it looks hard, therefore it is hard. People also have this perception that it's hard to actually find out what you can do with it, because there's a lot you can do with it, but to work out exactly what it is, it's really tricky. And so this is termed discoverability, and so there's actually quite a tricky approach to discoverability in the system. The other thing that people are saying to us a lot is that actually learning the software is tricky because there's so many buttons to click, just like in an LMS, there's so many buttons to click, so many places to go. And so there's obviously a challenge around learnability here as well. And depending on how often you use the system, we have course coordinators coming back at us saying, I only use this, twice a year. And when I come back to it, profanity, how do I use this thing again? There's too many things to click, where do I go? And so there's, again, the idea of memorability being really key in the system usability challenge around learning analytics software. And these speak to various points of the pipeline. So when we think about the pipeline and think about, okay, well, if you're able to hook the people on, how do you actually get them to keep going with the adoption of the platform? And this idea of reinvention really came across quite strongly in our data. Reinvention is a term that comes from Roger's Diffusion of Innovations framework, and he talks about how typically when we think about innovations, we think about adopters as passive recipients. And he says reinvention actually is quite important, because reinvention is where the adopters, or the instructors in our case, actually try and change the innovation to suit. and that if you actually have or the ability of reinvention, the innovation actually is able to match what they need a bit more. And so what we're seeing with reinvention, just two quick examples here, a rulebook. So we saw the example just then in the demo about how, you know, a tutor can go through, or TA can go through and tick yes and no and great and okay and those kind of things. But what we saw is people transform that rulebook into something that looks like this. And so not only are they ticking yes and no and here, not here, but they're also putting in information that the system has about students, similar to what we saw here. And so a lot of our instructors now are doing this to help their tutors, their teaching assistants, better know their students and connect to them. Strangely enough, during COVID, we also had, because the SRES has the ability to do QR attendance tracking, we had a lot of people across the university essentially try and build out COVID contact tracing using the system. So we were, these faculties that did this was faster than the government of actually in establishing contact tracing abilities. And even though this isn't pedagogical, it actually did this third point here, it actually increased uptake from faculties which were less, more reticent towards picking it up. And so our engineering faculty, for example, maybe I shouldn't name names, engineering faculty were particularly reticent to pick up SRES because they perceived it as quite difficult. But because they were forced to use it for contact tracing this year, actually they're starting to use it more for feedback and richer purposes now. And so this uptake is quite important. And so the question is just like the engineering example, how do we actually get people hooked in the first place? This idea of how do we get them to know about it so that they can actually be persuaded and then decide. And these come into play with these ideas of communication encounters. And really, when we speak to our instructors through the interviews, what they're telling us is essentially tell us stories of what works. Focus on demonstrating the value. Tell us little vignettes of what works. This one's quite nice. Give us anecdotal examples. You know, it's not data, but it's anecdotes, but still it works for them. Show them how it's used. So this second bold thing down underneath. And over here as well, really rely on these champions who share that, share their own innovations with the learning analytics system, and then help their colleagues see what they could do with it. And so communication encounters cover a lot more that I've got time to discuss now, but also there are these other things called usage and service encounters, and this paper down the bottom here discusses these in more detail. And so this essentially is a picture of the whole kind of innovation decision cycle, the pipeline that we push our faculty through, and they incorporate elements of diffusion innovation as well as ideas around co-creation. So the two main takeaways on the screen here, it's really that to get faculty on board, there's two things. The software itself needs to be diffusible. It needs to actually fluidly align to a lot of those aspects of Roger's diffusion of innovation framework that we saw. And also the ecosystem around the software needs to be built to support this. And so you have the socio-technical elements, and importantly, you have these different communication structures that need to exist. And so this is a slide that looks a bit salesman-y, but it's a slide that we give to our instructors a lot because we want to emphasize that the software is theirs. It's built by people who understand, for people who understand learning and teaching. And so what I guess we have coming up for us is we want to think about how to actually measure effectiveness better. So we've got increases in numbers, but there's not much you can tell from this. And so maybe what we could do is we can think about how the complexity of their adoption is changing over time. We've got these 5 archetypes of use. So people who just use it for example, for announcements, you know, how do they progress from using it for announcements to using it for much more engaging purposes, for example? Some ideas around, because of the large corpus of this feedback that people have put into the system, using machine learning to actually identify and try to improve some of these practices. And obviously we're open to more collaborators, and it's freely available to institutions who would like to collaborate with us, and we'd love to hear from you. So with that, apologies, I'm 3 minutes over time. I want to thank you for listening, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks a lot, Danny, for the fantastic presentation. So let's move on to questions. So while questions are coming in, I will ask Samin if you can maybe unmute and ask question yourself. So I'm gonna just put that.
I'll try, but I'm not sure if my voice would be clear. But thank you for a very nice presentation. I was just curious to know if the SRES can offer personalized support in other ways than feedback. Especially, I was interested in seeing like you had those emotions there. So if a student says that he's feeling anxious, then how does the system or the teacher respond to such kind of affective behavior? Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And the thing with the system is that teachers can use it for whatever they see fit. And so we have some times where, so let me just show you on the screen. Actually, no, I'll just talk about it. Teachers can generate, for example, visualizations. So if they have their class of 1,000 feeding in their emotions, they can generate a visualization on a dashboard that tells them, 80% of your students are feeling sad. They can even present this visualization back to students as well, so to give the students some reflection of their own cohort's data. And using this, for example, then teachers can customize those emails or those web pages based on those self-reported emotions or self-reported or teacher-reported factors to then provide particular support or to modulate the kind of support they have. And so we have a instructor in psychology, for example, who, depending on how students are going and what they're telling him, he will modulate his message depending on data which the system knows about the students. And so it's really up to how the teachers themselves want to do it.
Thank you.
Okay. I have one question about things relating to how the messages feel. So we use OnTask at UniSA, and what I really like about it is that you cannot really tell whether it was written by a human or not, because technically it is written by a human. It just automated sending. And then we added some of the links like, hi Johnny, great work on the assignment, take a look at the discussions. And there is a link, go to the discussion, like typical like a marketing email. And one thing I had a problem with that, then it doesn't feel real anymore. So then it's obvious it's been generated. Right? So when you shifted to this idea with the feedback page, now I know it's not by a human. I mean, not authentically sit down, type on a keyboard and send the message. Did that have any impact on how they perceive those messages?
Yep, that's a great question. I'm just trying to bring up another slide deck. So we throughout the emails and also these web pages, we collect data from students about how they perceive how helpful it is or not, and so students are invited to vote on certain things. And so as part of that, what we can collect, let me share my screen, is we collect some free text comments from students, and these free text comments are essentially students saying, responding to the prompt, why was it helpful, why was it not helpful? And so we have on the screen here for these portals, which are these web pages as opposed to the emails, a topic, essentially a topic analysis or topic modeling analysis of what they're saying to us. And so they're not saying, you're right, they're not saying things like, I love my teacher now, they care about me, which is what they say with the emails. But they're saying things like, things are clearer now, the information is helpful, I feel more organized, I can understand where I'm going more, and those kind of things. And so even though it's not about that personal relationship, it's more about that kind of the structure and the understanding of where they're tracking in the course. So helpful in a different way, I guess.
Yeah, that was also, it does, they don't comment on the sense of relationship with it, because that's one thing that was clear when you do send an email. Oh, thank you very much for reminding me, it was really great for helping me, and so on. Whereas while that was an automated tool that reminded me, it wasn't really, I'm not thanking him so much.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep, so,
great.
Yep. So on the screen here, there's the topic modeling from the actual emails themselves, and you're right. What you see more here is, thanks, and I feel something, and it's helpful, and those kind of things. Yeah, definitely.